Deads. It seems like they're everywhere these days, but by their nature they never last long. Denizens escaping a live description. They have a hard time of it really, trapped in some of the most contained containment zones. I say zones because there are admittedly several different zones now. While there is plenty of time for speculation on how that happened, and what the government forces are doing, or not doing, to allay this rather foul situation, I think we should focus now on what really matters, that those still alive in the infection zones are doing their jolly best. In order to educate ourselves on the ways of life these lucky few have adopted, we shall carry on to our next Dead file. Dead 4. Fred Foltz. After hearing the news of all that was happening in the sleepy town of Muldra, Fred Foltz felt somewhat refreshed. You see, Fred was the sort of guy who loved to strap on his boots and get out of the town. Live in a dump like Muldra, and you will understand that Fred was wiser than most to pick up this particular hobby. All of this talk of civic disaster was more than enough excuse to skip work and get to strolling. Where to? Poor Fred had already made his first mistake. The infection is, by and large, not localized enough that you can just walk away from it, or drive away from it, or fly away from it, or... The point is, there wasn't actually anywhere Fred could go, however, we shan't spoil his fun. Fred hurriedly grabbed a few bits and pieces from around his house at the north end of town, took up a baseball bat in case all these rumours of monsters really were true, and set off at a hearty hiker's pace. The Muldra woodland corridor was right outside his house, and so it was at first a nice morning walk in nature. Never mind the sound of what was really happening, still perfectly audible from outside the woods. There in the trees, Fred was able to fully convince himself that he was safe, and making many muscular steps in the right direction. Silly Fred. There were other residents of the half-habitable shacks that flanked the woodland corridor, and those other residents had, on the occasion of their ingesting the hypothetical disease-bearing aerosol, sometimes fled into the woods in the few agonizing moments of sanity that remained to them. Then they became not just your average zombie, but woodland beasts of a fairy tale mode, waiting to pounce on unsuspecting travelers who strayed from civilization. Now, do we know of any such travelers? Give Fred some credit. He wasn't unsuspecting. He was very aware that something terrible might happen. Did that help at all? Of course not. That is not to say there is no chance of using the trees to sneak away from danger, not at all. It is just that Fred did so in a rather moronic fashion. So let us learn. There was a small house some distance into the corridor that was home to one of Fred's old walking buddies, one Three Laces Jones, who was away on vacation at the time. Don't worry, the zombies will find you yet, Mr. Jones. Anyway, Fred wanted to steal Mr. Jones's hiking equipment, being that it was of greatly higher quality and quantity than his own. However, Mr. Jones was so prudent as to leave a burglar alarm on his woodland cabin, perhaps knowing that his obscenely expensive selection of waterproof glasses cases, mud-resistant spoons, high-visibility juggling balls, and all manner of other important hiking gear that a man on television told him to buy, was going to attract the wrong kind of attention. It was going to attract the scraggly, wannabe, flat-footed, bargain basement penknifer Fred Foltz. And now, with Fred's greedy prying on the locked windows picked up by the motion detector, it was the alarm itself that would be attracting attention. Here they come. From behind every tree and bush, there was a hungry mouth paddling through the undergrowth towards the wailing siren, their target quickly becoming the warm-blooded, tumbling flail of a man fleeing the scene of the crime. Fred used his bat to thwack, push and shove his way through to the other side of the woodland corridor, hoping to find shelter in the mangy grounds of the Muldra trailer park. My friends, let me tell you something about the Muldra trailer park. An outbreak of mindless cannibalism was only the 5th most horrifying event of the previous fortnight, and it improved the standards of conversation one could find there dramatically. So perhaps we should praise Fred for his choice of refuge. And by refuge, I mean a never-ending assault course of trailer-to-trailer battles against opponents who, for the most part, probably weren't even zombified. Maybe all the unspeakable chemicals that made these triple-distilled quasi-human urks so rambunctious also happened to protect against the zombie virus. These are matters for scientists to test, again and again, even if the subjects don't know they're being tested on. It's okay, as I overheard my producer gloating last night, the dead don't sue. The benefits to this whole affair seem to keep piling up, don't they? Fred's hike really hadn't gone very well. He ended up cowering in the cramped shower room of one particular trailer, unable to comprehend how simply hiking away from his problems like usual hadn't worked out this time. Well, Fred, these particular problems can hike too, and they never ever get tired. The scientists are now certain of that. The trailer was surrounded by the beasts, and so Fred had no choice but to fight his way out. After building up the courage in the way that only rocking back and forth in an ash-stained shower cubicle can achieve, he gripped his bat and went to answer the many knocks on the trailer door. The finely polished wood swooshed into the crowd of unwanted cold callers. Even Fred would admit that this was a little fun, I am sure. He battered and pushed his way out once again, striking one particular petulant peddler so hard that his bat was splintered into two. Oh dear. Fred was able to wrestle away from the closing grasp of the horde, but at a cost. Fred got bit. And who remembers their lessons on whether or not getting bit is a good idea? Anyone? I see a few hands in the class. Yes, Fred was now a dead. But I want to inspire you anyway with the tale of how close Fred came to legitimate achievement. So let me tell you the details of his hopeless final day on this absolutely not hopeless and not final and nothing is at all wrong planet. After slipping away from immediate danger, Fred's hike was hiked up to a run. He blundered his way out of the trailer park, benefiting from all the racket he'd made within the park, having drawn all the locals inward. Now the perimeter was hardly patrolled at all, and hence Fred actually made an unnoticed escape. He fumbled through the woodland corridor one more time, and managed to find a proper brick house to hide in a little further out of town. No one sentient enough to see him stealing in, and nothing worth bothering to set up an alarm for on the inside. Muldra in microcosm. Now here's a good place to cower and panic, Fred. You see, you're getting better at this. So Fred armed himself with various kitchen implements and locked himself in the bathroom upstairs. No one came a-knocking, and the darkness of night began to fall. Safe at last. Oh, but watch this. A bite wound. Nothing serious, I expect. Wash it off and all will be fine by morning. We do like to have a bit of a laugh here on the Dead Files. Fred's master plan was to sneak out before dawn and make the rest of his journey in the dark, believing that A, he could see better in the dark than the beasts, wrong, and B, that there was somewhere he could get to that would justify all the effort he was going through. Wrong? Well, that's a matter of debate. All we can give you is the Dead Files' official advice. Don't stay in your home, and don't leave your home. Remember the 1D. Don't. Putting this ingenious plan into action, Fred found himself walking up the road into the countryside, hardly able to see his feet hitting the ground in front of him. He could hear his feet on the concrete, and he could hear quite a few other feet on the concrete too. Oh dear. The darkness now shielded Fred from knowing just how many zombies were following him along the road, so that's a lucky break. And another light note, the extreme danger of the situation got his hiking game up to a new level. He was positively power walking, a spring in his step and a snarl at his sides. This was a real hike, and even Three Laces Jones had never conquered this particular route in these particular conditions. Better to die on your feet than live on your knees, even if that makes tying your bootlaces more difficult. Hikers everywhere salute Fred Foltz. We aren't entirely sure what happened to Fred that night because it was very, very dark. Based on the noises our scientists recorded, or speculated might have occurred because there are no recording devices in place even before the incident that didn't happen, Fred must have battled many creatures on his journey. But his progress was marked, passing out into open country, no longer guided by roads, but also no longer pursued by the horde. He really did manage to shake them, although next time we saw him, with hypothetical cameras of course, he had been bitten one or two additional times and was overall worse for wear. However, now he'd reached a place he could be safe for his precious final hours. The forest he emerged from at dawn flanked a large farm estate, deserted, spacious, and comfortably furnished with the wealth of decades of Kentucky state government subsidies. Rest in peace to them all. Here, Fred could flit about, looking through cupboards and inspecting the farm's outbuildings and fields, dreaming of a life where maybe somehow he got the place operational and lived in a sort of one-man agricultural utopia, taking all he needed from the land and never again being concerned with the affairs of man. Unless the state government subsidies returned from the dead as easily as the senators did. Did you see the news last night? This didn't happen, but perhaps you will be inspired by Fred's final flickering dream to grab onto such a hope for yourself. We all know how it ends though, don't we? Life always ends in death, they say, but only some of you will be lucky enough to become a dead after death. Fred transformed right in the middle of his farmyard, clocking in at 2 days and 13 hours of pre-dead action. It was a hell of a hike, Fred, I'll give you that. What is the lesson from this dead file? You can't walk away from your problems anymore. Not that these are your problems, eh? But if and when they are, well, keep listening, because there was another man in Muldrar who had hiking on the brain. Let's look at another attempt to escape the abyssal drowning of all human destiny in our next Dead file. Dead 5. Charles Tilley. Now, Charles was a man who clearly had a head on his shoulders, which of course is an increasingly rare thing with all this talk of decapitating zombies kills them forever going around. I'm fairly sure it doesn't, but we shall await official government advice on this matter. Charles was keeping his prized head down, because Charles was lucky enough to have got such a gracious retirement package from his time in the Muldrar Fire Department that he could just about afford to live in a run-down trailer in the very trailer park that our previous dead was flapping about in. Ah yes, this is what it's all for, the American dream, wealth for work, help for heroes, and so on and so on. It's the sort of injustice that made a jaded, defeated old fireman realize that his real pension was being paid out right now, as whoever survived this strange mess would be the owner of all that wasn't nailed down, and Charles was handy enough with a hammer to overcome nails too, actually. Once Fred was done stirring up trouble, Charles aptly noted how many zombies had gone off looking for the madman. Now was Charles's chance to slip out and start stealing anything he wanted from the local area. As I said, the American dream. And as if the good Lord on high had decided to manifest Charles's destiny right there and then, there was a zombie standing right outside his door, holding a crowbar. Did this enterprising fellow have the same idea before he turned? Or was it simply a grovelling zombie here to make an offer to Muldrar's new master? Charles thought the latter, and obliged his new subject by seizing the crowbar with a muscular grip and beating the delivery boy to a pulp. A gentle rain was falling, the cold water mixing with warm blood to form a comfortable layer of the most unspeakably potent refreshment. Don't try this at home, unless you have to, which you very well might, so don't be too disappointed. Well, clearly it was time for the rise of ingrate Muldrar's forgotten hero. Charles Tilley was on the take. Cupboards were emptied. Any residents still milling about were milled to the finest grain by the methodical, unrelenting crowbar of our hero. He burst into the trailer of his rival from the old days, a retired cop by the moniker 3 Tickets Pete, and from the old curmudgeon's stash, Charles acquired a Kevlar vest to aid in his battle. So far it sounds like we're hardly recounting a dead file at all. Charles was doing great. Well, there is a big lesson coming, so just you wait. Sometime later, Charles was, shall we say, securing a house not far from the trailer park. Around 7 residents were soon even deader than before, and Charles was hurriedly pouring loot into a duffel bag. Reports say that he had a wide smile on his face as cash and jewellery flowed into his swag bag. How we know his facial expression is, I am afraid, a confidential matter that the military scientific complex who oversee the whole incident has nothing at all to do with. Not that we would know they have nothing to do with it, since it's confidential. The point is, Charles was getting all the payback on society he ever wanted, and he wanted quite a lot actually. He stayed the night in this house, thinking he could take his stash home in the morning and probably pick out a house to live in from now on, since they were all generously opening their doors to him. Charles, for one night, really was the king of Muldra. The end. He wins. Perfect performance. No dead file to be found here, eh? No, of course not. Charles was woken in the early morning, still dark, by the sound of groaning, moaning, roughing and tumbling. He looked out into the street and saw none other than the late Mr. Fred Fultz undertaking his pre-dawn escape, a horde of zombies forming a wake of flesh on his tail. Fultz blundered right past Charles's safe house, and a large amount of the pack noticed the whiff of an unwashed criminal inside. That's just the Muldra musk, my friends. They say you get used to it. Charles grabbed his loot and battled his way out of the house, slaying more foes than he could count, but there were always more. Muldra has a few thousand people, you know, or had. There's even a rather humorous hypothesis going around that the zombies will occasionally regrow their entire body from separated parts in order to effectively reproduce, ensuring that one dead zombie will eventually bloom into many equally able alive ones, if alive is the right word there. Well, this hypothesis would explain a lot, wouldn't it? But let's leave all that big brain boffin work to those who are in complete control of the situation. For us, we must lament that Charles had got the full attention of the Horde, and his ongoing battle to escape was really just drawing more publicity to his cause. The Streisand effect hasn't gone anywhere, and so the more of a fuss you make about staying alive, the more things will show up to join the drama. Ah, we humans are simple creatures, even when piloted by malicious microscopic lifeforms once thought beyond scientific possibility. It's a strange old world. So old, in fact, that it might have to be sent to a happy farm outside the city forever. Well, that's what happened to Fred Fultz, and we know how his tale ended. And now we know that Fred's folly also destroyed the right royal kingdom of Charles Tilly, pension pioneer, grandee of the Golden Farewell, who had now fallen all the way back down to where he started. Charles locked himself in his trailer, hoping the Horde would give up and go home. No, zombies have no home but that which they might make from your bodily fluids. They've nowhere to be. They can wait. And you might as well go down fighting at this stage, for the sake of the cameras. Not that there are cameras, but somehow we know that Charles battled the zombies inside his trailer, unable to move for the beasts, and eventually that crowbar slid to the ground, soaked in viscera. Goodbye, Charles. Now, what is the lesson here? Did anyone catch it? Where did Charles go wrong? He snuck around in the rain, avoiding attention. Very good. He killed not for the sake of it, he killed with a clear goal in mind, and focused on that, avoiding any addiction to bloodlust. Very good. He didn't shout or scream at any noises he saw, watching carefully as others ruined their lives instead. Excellent. He even collected vital equipment and food in short order, and was ready to survive. Oh, Charles, we miss you already. There was one thing that destroyed Charles's hopes. Someone else. Yes, the big lesson from this dead file is that no matter what you do, no matter what advantages you harvest from the falling corpse of civilization, there will be someone else out there who will ruin everything for you anyway. Even the best are at the mercy of the worst in this trying time. To put it another way, there is nothing you can do. Now that's a helpful lesson if ever there was one. So we leave Charles, who survived perhaps a day in the wild, regretful that he counted among the shortest-lived of our deads. Muldra's finest are no match for Muldra's worst. Ah, every dead file seems to give us more and more to worry about when the time comes, eh? If it comes. If it comes. We're still not completely certain that this will happen to everyone, so tune in next time to see if there's any hope? Right. Goodbye, and don't be caught dead acting like a dead. Even though we just told you there's nothing you can do differently. It's in the air. It's in the air. Everyone says the scientists will find a cure, but most of them get turned by the sun. Or the rumour is the immune ones get kidnapped, black-bagged, Government's doing something. They have a way to survive, I bet. Not gonna tell us little folk. And the scotch isn't being delivered here after everything. Maybe tomorrow there will be good news. Maybe tomorrow.